It is one of the hottest days of the year here in the UK. Hair product is quite literally melting out of my hair, and I'm wearing the thickest sunscreen I own, because that is one thing I will never negotiate on. I will always wear my sunscreen. But as we know, there are people out there who refuse to wear sunscreen, and some of them also own a skincare brand, which I find kind of strange and also led me to today's story. Recently, Kristin Cavallari launched a range of skincare products under her brand Uncommon James, and under normal circumstances, I probably wouldn't have thought much about it. Another celebrity skincare brand launch doesn't surprise me anymore. At this point, launching skincare feels like almost like a natural part of the celebrity and influencer life cycle. Successful television career, you probably write a book. You definitely start a podcast, everyone has a podcast, and you launch a lifestyle brand. And eventually, skincare shows up somewhere along the way. What caught my attention wasn't the skincare. It was something Kristin said a few months earlier on her podcast.
Discuss the sun and sunscreen, which I know is controversial. I don't wear sunscreen.
I know it's controversial. I don't wear sunscreen. When I first heard that clip, I genuinely thought there had to be more context coming. I don't know a lot about Kristin Cavallari other than some of her history, but I knew she was into beauty. So I was a little bit confused. I thought maybe she meant she only wears sunscreen on holiday, or maybe she meant she forgets to reapply, or maybe she only wears it when she's like, I don't know, spending time outside for 5 minutes. I don't know. But no, the conversation carried on and eventually turned into this big discussion about why maybe people don't need sunscreen as much as we've been led to believe. Now listen, this isn't going to be a video all about clean beauty or why you should wear sunscreen, but it's a big part of this conversation. So then I kind of became a bit more interested in her and her brand, kind of more out of pure concern and a little bit of confusion, shall we say. I'll be honest, right? I don't particularly care what Kristin Cavallari does with her own skin. She's an adult. If she never wants to wear sunscreen again, that's entirely on her. I wouldn't recommend it, but that's her decision. She's also not someone I would ever have thought to turn to for skincare advice either. But what interests me was the massive contradiction here. We're not just talking about somebody who has no interest in skincare, therefore doesn't wear sunscreen, which is often the case. We are now talking about somebody who sells skincare. We are talking about somebody who has built a huge part of her professional brand around wellness, healthy living, clean products. You know how much I hate that. I'm going to try not to talk about it too much. And taking care of yourself. And the more I looked into this whole thing, the stranger it became, especially when I looked at the products she was selling in her skincare brand. It just doesn't make sense. Looking more into the interview she'd given about the brand, the guest doctor that she had on her podcast. Then I started looking at the claims she made about sunscreen, and oh my god, it just went on and on and on. So alongside sunscreen, today I want to talk about how Kristin Cavallari went from being one of the most recognizable faces in reality television to becoming somebody people trust for health and wellness advice. So before we talk about skincare, before we talk about the sunscreen comments, and before we start talking about her brand, we need to talk about Kristin Cavallari herself, because if you've only recently discovered her through maybe social media, podcasts, or her lifestyle brand, you might not realize how long she's been building towards this moment. If you were around, or an adult, or a teen during the early 2000s, there's a very good chance you already know who Kristin Cavallari is. Long before everything she's got going on right now, she was a pretty massive reality star. One of the biggest names in reality television. She first appeared on Laguna Beach, a show that followed a group of teenagers growing up in one of the wealthiest parts of California. I actually need to watch this. I saw they have a reunion and I need to go back to it. Looking back now, it's fairly tame compared to modern reality television, but at the time it was huge. Kristin quickly became one of the show's central characters, and depending on who you ask or how you see her, she was either refreshingly honest or basically the villain of the entire story. Then came The Hills, same story there. She actually only really appeared in the last series or so, but of course, that kind of like re-sparked and rekindled her fame. Then of course, all the magazine covers, tabloids, all things that usually come along with being famous at a very young age and at that time as well. What's interesting about Kristin though is that unlike a lot of reality stars from that same era, she didn't disappear when the cameras stopped rolling. She adapted very, very well. And over time, she slowly shifted away from being known as primarily a reality television personality and started building something much bigger around herself. Books, her jewelry brand, Uncommon James, then podcasts, lifestyle content. Kristin kind of stopped being just a celebrity celebrity and kind of became somewhat of almost like this elite influencer, and very quickly became a lifestyle authority. Now, whether you personally agree with her advice is a completely different conversation, but you really can't deny that she's been very successful at building up her image. If you look at the way Kristin presents herself today, it's very, very different from the person many people remember from Laguna Beach or the Hills. The focus is now on wellness, healthy eating, natural living, clean products, exercise, self-improvement, family balance, all those things that people kind of follow celebrities for and influencers for and aspire to. It's the kind of content that's become very popular over the last decade because it feels aspirational while still being somewhat attainable. Although I do have my own kind of opinions when it comes to clean beauty and how aspirational it really is and how elitist it is. But Kristin doesn't present herself as an untouchable Hollywood celebrity. She presents herself as somebody who's figured a few things out and wants to share them with you. And people obviously respond to that very, very well. A lot of people respond to that. She's an elite influencer, like I said. The thing is, wellness is a fascinating space because unlike fashion or entertainment, it sits right next to health. But the line between the two can become very, very blurry. The line between the two can become very blurry very, very quickly. So we have people sharing like what they eat in a day. Fine. The next minute they're discussing supplements and nutritional advice for kids kind of thing. And then they're talking about hormone health, then skincare, then longevity, biohacking, then medicine. Then suddenly they're discussing topics that would normally be left to specialists like doctors. It's a very fine line. It's a worrying fine line, to be honest with you. But that's not unique to Kristin. We've seen it happen over and over again with celebrities. People trust them in one area of their life, and eventually that trust starts expanding into other areas too. I don't think that's necessarily anybody's fault. It's just human nature. If somebody looks healthy, confident, successful, rich, and happy, we naturally become curious about what they're doing to achieve that. Like, how did they get where they are today? Both in life and in the looks department, we want to know their secrets. The problem is that there usually isn't a secret. Most of the time, it's a combination of genetics, money, access, consistency, good habits, and a carefully curated public image. But there is no secret isn't a particularly exciting answer, right? And that's one of the reasons wellness has become such a powerful industry. People are constantly searching for answers, which brings us to Uncommon Beauty. Because by the time Kristin launched a skincare brand, she'd already spent years building credibility around wellness and healthy living. The skincare wasn't appearing out of nowhere. In a lot of ways, like I mentioned earlier, it's just the natural next step for celebrities, but it did make a lot of sense for her business. The more interviews I read from around the launch, the more I realized that she wasn't really selling these skincare products. This is somebody who could have launched olive oil in a tub kind of thing. She was selling the trust that she built up with her followers. People weren't buying a cleanser because Kristin Cavallari was a cosmetic chemist. People aren't buying a moisturizer because she spent years studying dermatology anyway. They're buying stuff because they trust her, and they trust her to steer them away from toxic chemicals and anything that might potentially harm them. And once I start looking at the brand through that kind of lens, a lot of things start making much more sense, if I'm being honest, including some of the things that would eventually lead to her questioning sunscreen. So let's talk about Uncommon James, her brand, and Uncommon Beauty. When Kristin launched the brand back in 2021, she explained that she'd become concerned about the skincare products she was using. In interviews, she described that she was sending products away for like testing and being shocked by what she found. According to Kristin, many of the luxury products she thought were relatively clean, bearing in mind clean doesn't mean anything, contained ingredients that didn't align with her standards or her lifestyle. Now, I don't know about you, but whenever I hear somebody says that they discovered something shocking about an entire industry, my first instinct is to be like, oh my God, what did you find? Because shocking can mean a lot of things. And in this case, it didn't mean much. Like, did she find evidence of contamination? Like unsafe products, real dangerous ingredients, regulatory violations? Or did they simply find ingredients that they personally don't like? Turns out we'd never know, but I guess the latter. Instead, the discussion always stayed really, really broad. Kristin talked about those harmful ingredients, fillers, products that weren't as clean as they claimed to be, and wanting products she felt comfortable recommending to friends and family. Bearing in mind, when these types of people say clean, it's usually the appeal to nature fallacy. So they mean more natural leaning products, because for some reason, there's this belief that natural is better for you and cannot possibly harm you in any way. But listen, I always say, I don't blame these people who think clean beauty is the safer option, especially when they have a family to care for. I think that's completely reasonable. Who wouldn't want what they think is safer products. We all want transparency. Who wouldn't want brands to be honest about what's inside their formulations? I mean, they are. Brands are honest, but the clean beauty cult doesn't trust science, let's be honest. One of the things that fascinates me about clean beauty is how often the language sounds scientific whilst also avoiding actual scientific discussion. Again, I'm going to repeat myself here, but this is relevant to the podcast with that doctor. You'll hear phrases like chemical-free, toxin-free, clean ingredients, natural alternatives, etc., and free from harmful additives and fillers. But once you start looking into what that actually means, it really doesn't make sense, because what one brand considers clean, another one doesn't. What one wellness influencer avoids, another one always recommends. What one company calls toxic, another company has been using safely for decades. And when we start looking into Kristin's skincare line, I wouldn't look at these and think clean beauty. We'll talk about that more in a minute. Long story short, people think with clean beauty that they are getting protection. And that's why clean beauty became such a successful movement. As I said, the more natural something sounds, the better it seems. The more scientific something sounded, the more suspicious people became. And when you look at Kristin's broader wellness philosophy, you can start to see how naturally Uncommon Beauty fits into that world. This wasn't some random celebrity deciding to launch skincare because everybody else was doing it. The brand feels like a direct extension of how she already views health and wellness. The concern about ingredients, the focus on natural living, the want to avoid things that feel artificial or unnecessary, I guess you can say. But what's interesting is when you actually look at Uncommon Beauty's original products, they're not particularly radical in any way, and I don't mean that in a bad way. The products look fine. I like my preservatives personally because I don't like mold. So she originally launched with 5 products initially back in 2021, and of course that has expanded into things like eye patches, coffee scrubs. Why do clean beauty people always do coffee scrubs that can literally rip your body to shit? I don't know. Oil, gua sha, etc, etc. So I did what I always do whenever a celebrity launches a skincare line. I went straight into the ingredients list, because after reading all these interviews about how harmful ingredients in skincare can be and whatever these shocking discoveries were, I wanted to know what she created instead to solve this issue. So this isn't all her products, but I'm just going to go through some of the ones that I found the most interesting. And interesting because they're also contradictory to something she's going to later say. So we have the glutathione serum, which contains glutathione, vitamin C, kojic acid, and hyaluronic acid. Great ingredients, all make sense together, right? Brightening, antioxidant, protection, hydration. Nothing unusual there. It actually sounds kind of nice and normal. Then we have the peptide nectar, which is essentially a hydrating antioxidant serum built around, again, vitamin C, peptides, ferulic acid, and a collection of fruit extracts. Then we have the water cream, which is a lightweight moisturizer packed with humectants, emollients, and barrier supporting ingredients. We have an eye cream too, contains squalane, hyaluronic acid, and argireline, which is a peptide that's often marketed as the Botox alternative. You know that one. And I don't mean to rush through these, but the more I looked through the range, the more I kept thinking, these are really normal standard products. They're not reinventing skincare or exposing some secret the beauty industry has been hiding from us. They're just skincare. Good modern skincare from what I can tell. Then I noticed something else. One of the reoccurring themes throughout Uncommon Beauty's marketing is the idea that the product should be natural. The pineapple peptide nectar is advertised as naturally smelling good because the ingredients used rather than synthetic fragrance. The glutathione serum contains orange extract, lemon extract, clove extract, and rose oil. The pineapple peptide nectar contains lemon extract, basil extracts, pineapple extract again, papaya extract, and various fruit ferments. The coffee scrub, which I mentioned earlier, contains cinnamon bark oil. Now, that doesn't automatically make all of these irritating, but some of the ingredients most likely to cause sensitivity in skincare have historically come from essential oils, plant extracts, and naturally derived fragrance compounds. If we're going to be as picky as the clean beauty industry is and take the just-in-case approach like clean beauty does, they should be avoiding all of the above. The conversation always starts with safety, right? But eventually turns into preference for ingredients that sound more natural. That's what I get from all of that. So when you take that into consideration, it's no surprise that she doesn't like sunscreen. As I mentioned, people are allowed to have opinions about sunscreen. They'd be wrong, but people are allowed to have their reservations. Well, questions. People are allowed to make decisions about their own health. If Kristin Cavallari wanted to spend every day laying in the sun covered in baby oil, that's her business. But I hate when these conversations happen on a podcast in particular. There is just something about podcast clips that always go crazy on social media. They spread like wildfire, and they're so easy to take out of context. And it's even easier to have a guest on your podcast, and people just assume they have the credentials to be talking about what they're talking about. So let's look at this podcast clip. I'll play it for you now.
Discuss the sun and sunscreen, which I know is controversial. I don't wear sunscreen.
And I'm going to talk about the extended version now as well. So basically, this podcast clip, I think, starts in a very good place, like a place that's very easy to agree with. Kristin's guest, Dr. Ryan Monahan, talks about the benefits of sunlight. Great. He talks about how much time people spend indoors. He talks about how disconnected modern life can be from nature.
We've literally spent our whole existence as humans under the sun all day until the last 100 years or so. And now we're shut-ins, spend 93% of our lives indoors. That's really bad for a lot of reasons. The sun is life-giving and nourishing.
And I don't think many people would disagree with that spending time outside is generally a good thing. I mean, even dermatologists agree with this. I think there's a lot of fear around the sun at the moment. You can use sunscreen and go out in the sun. One of my favorite dermatologists to follow online, Dr. Maxfield, is very pro this. He is a great example of caring for your skin whilst also going out and being active and enjoying the sun. The issue here is that the conversation seemed to very quickly drift somewhere else, as it always does. And before long, they weren't just talking about the benefits of sunlight anymore or the benefits of being outside. They were, of course, talking about sunscreen and how bad it is.
Astaxanthin is the antioxidant that is specific to the skin, and that can help. It's like an internal sunscreen.
Cool.
Yeah.
And coconut oil too, right? Can you use that as sunscreen?
Oh, I don't know, actually. I
I've
suppose you
heard
can.
that.
I don't do that personally. You could definitely consume coconut oil because it's very anti-inflammatory in that way.
Okay, yeah.
I just don't understand this way of thinking. You can appreciate the benefits of sunlight and still recognize that UV radiation damages your skin. You can spend time outdoors and wear sunscreen. Not me though, I'd rather not. I hate being outside. Not because of the sun, I'd rather not. You can care about vitamin D and still protect yourself from excessive sun exposure. But I find that's not how the wellness conversations always go. Instead, there's this implication that you've got two competing sides. One side there's nature, there's natural intuition and almost this ancient wisdom that comes with respecting the sun, that only those who are truly awake, third eye, know about this intuition. And on the other side there's modern medicine, experts and science and regulation. And they can just kind of never meet in the middle. But isn't Dr. Ryan Monahan an expert? Well, Kristin refers to him as her doctor, which of course a lot of listeners would naturally interpret that in a certain way. When most people hear the word doctor in a conversation about skin health, they're probably picturing a medical doctor, maybe even a dermatologist, somebody whose entire career has revolved around studying skin and disease. Ryan's background is very different. So before we go any further, let's try to understand who Ryan Monahan actually is, because throughout the podcast, as I mentioned, Kristin constantly refers to him as her doctor. And of course, you immediately think medical school. Of course he went to medical school. But Ryan's background is actually very, very different. He holds a master's and doctoral degrees in Eastern medicine from Emperor's College in Santa Monica, California, a school focused on disciplines such as traditional Chinese medicine, acupuncture, and holistic health approaches. He later completed training through several major functional medicine organizations, including the Institute for Functional Medicine, the Kressa Institute, and the Kalish Institute. If you are familiar with functional medicine, it's generally built around the idea of identifying the root cause of illness rather than simply treating symptoms. On paper, that sounds very reasonable, and it's one of the reasons functional medicine has actually become so popular. The challenge is, though, that the field is incredibly broad. Incredibly broad. Depending on the practitioner, it can range from lifestyle advice to nutrition guidance to extensive testing, supplement protocols, and treatments that many conventional medical organizations consider controversial or just straight out lacking any evidence. Looking through Ryan's website, his work spans everything from gut health, hormones and longevity, to chronic illness, detoxification, ancestral nutrition, autoimmune conditions, healthy aging, and skin concerns. Now, none of this automatically makes him untrustworthy in any way, but it's important to mention because expertise, especially when it comes to skin and formulation, are very specific. If I want advice on how ingredients work and if a product is actually going to work for me, I'm probably going to go to a cosmetic chemist rather than a dermatologist. If I want advice on how to change something on my skin, I'm going to go to a dermatologist and not a cosmetic chemist, you know? And there are other routes that you go down, but it's very specific. There's not really one that encompasses everything. And that's why I found the reaction to this podcast so interesting, because after the clip started spreading online, of course, dermatologists started responding. One of the claims discussed was the idea that gradually exposing yourself to the sun creates a sort of sun protection. You'll often hear people call this a base tan.
If you live an anti-inflammatory lifestyle, you take a lot of antioxidant supplementation, and you work up your base coat in the sun, you can start to tolerate the sun instead of burning, right? So it's not saying just go from 0 to 100 and spend 5 hours in the sun.
Right.
Like every spring, I start with like 5 minutes in the sun, work up to 10 minutes, 15, and then I build that. And by the end of summer, I'm in the sun for like the whole day without any sunscreen or anything like that.
Amazing.
Yeah.
If you spent enough time online, you've probably seen people repeat this as a fact, but dermatologists have debunked this myth over and over and over. Any tan is evidence that damage has already occurred. Any tan at any stage, including base. The same thing happened when the discussion turned to antioxidants. Again, antioxidants are great. They're in your skincare, they're in food. Many of the products Kristin sells contain antioxidants, which we'll talk about again in a minute. But antioxidants aren't sunscreen alternatives. Eating well isn't a sunscreen alternative. I hate this trend of like, eating my skincare, eating my sunscreen. Just fucking use sunscreen and skincare. Being healthy isn't sunscreen. And again, I was getting the impression that these two don't think there's any compromise. And what always rubs me the wrong way about these clean beauty point of views is like, why are we worrying so much about preservatives, synthetic ingredients, and whether a moisturizer is clean enough, while simultaneously questioning one of the most evidence-backed recommendations in skincare? Sunscreen. And not worrying about the class 1 carcinogen that we all get exposed to, the sun. Not the alleged carcinogen in skincare. I will never get past or understand that contradiction. It's so confusing to me. Now, credit where credit is due. Kind of. At least Kristin's message has always been fairly consistent. Pay attention to what you're putting in and on your body. Question things. Be intentional. Don't blindly accept what you're being told. Fine. The problem is that the lifestyle she loves and the clean beauty industry that she's bought into now and sells in doesn't question things. They just dismiss everything. Okay, so let's circle back to Uncommon Beauty. Let's remember that this is a brand that exists because Kristin herself became concerned about ingredients in skincare. It all comes from a place of concern and caution. The same mindset that encourages caution around ingredients seems to disappear when the subject turns to UV exposure. So I kept coming back to the products themselves because something just doesn't sit right with me, and there's a huge contradiction here. The glutathione serum, for example, is built around antioxidants like glutathione and vitamin C. The pineapple peptide nectar is again packed with antioxidants and marketed around helping skin look brighter, healthier, and more youthful. The eye cream focuses on fine lines and wrinkles. Throughout the range, there are ingredients designed to support skin health, improve the appearance of aging, and help skin look its best over time. None of this is unusual. That's what skincare brands do. They're all doing exactly the same thing. But with this brand, it's very different because antioxidants aren't pointless, right? Vitamin C isn't pointless. Peptides aren't pointless. They're good. These ingredients 100% have a place in skincare. The problem is with this brand, these ingredients are now being asked to do a job that they were never designed to do on their own without any support. Antioxidants work best alongside sunscreen, not instead of it. A lot of these products are marketed around helping skin look brighter, smoother, and healthier over time. Yet, one of the biggest contributors to all of the above is UV exposure. It's hard to get excited about glutathione serum helping improve the appearance of uneven skin tone when the person selling it is publicly questioning one of the most effective ways of helping prevent that uneven skin tone from developing in the first place. Bearing in mind she lives in Nashville, Tennessee right now. This is a place where I would say like 9 out of 12 months, a UV index is between 3 upwards. She needs to be wearing sunscreen. The same thing applies to the peptides. The same thing applies to the antioxidants. The same thing applies to the eye cream. They're all attempting to improve the visible consequences of skin aging, while the conversation around sunscreen is questioning one of the biggest causes of that aging. Like, the priorities feel completely like just upside down to me here. It doesn't make sense. Like, every time I look at this brand, I'm reminded of that podcast clip. I'm like, what is the point? Like, genuinely, what is the point? The brand's marketing is full of words like radiant, youthful, brightening, healthy, aging, environmental protection, fine lines, and wrinkles. The entire brand is built around helping people maintain healthier looking skin. Like, well, what are we actually doing here? It's crazy to me. The glutathione serum contains antioxidants. Great. Everything contains antioxidants. Great. Really, like, nice. Again, the products are absolutely fine. But if the audience following Kristin's advice walks away believing sunscreen is unnecessary, then they're spending money trying to solve problems that they're simultaneously being encouraged to create in the first place. Am I making sense? Do you know what I mean? It feels so frustrating. Not this brand, but this, well, yes, this brand, but this approach, this attitude towards what's good and bad for our skin. I don't think Kristin is malicious. She may have been a reality star villain, but I think she's a great businesswoman and influencer. But influence has consequences, whether you mean it or not. Unfortunately for her, she has questionable doctors giving her advice that just isn't based in science. When somebody with millions of followers say they don't wear sunscreen and then gives airtime to a doctor who says we don't need it, people are going to listen. Of course they will. That's the entire reason Uncommon Beauty exists. It exists because people trust Kristin. People trust her recommendations. People trust her judgment, her lifestyle. The skincare brand is built on trust. Again, it's nothing new. It's nothing revolutionary. The whole reason this brand exists is because people are like, what are you going to use then? If our skincare is toxic, please save us from it. Buy this kind of thing. And this is why she does have a responsibility to be careful with the advice she's giving now. But she's created an audience who's spending more money than necessary on their skin whilst becoming less protected. For all this talk of like healthy aging, protecting the skin, and making better choices, the most evidence-based advice in the entire skincare industry is somehow the thing people are treating like it's up for debate. And if that's the case, I genuinely don't know what these products are supposed to be protecting anyone from.